the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Dr. Christine Lee. Dr. Christine Lee, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you coach?
Well, thank you for having me here, Alison. I feel lucky to be here with you. And thank you for inviting me to say a few words on your show. Hello, all our dear listeners. I am Dr. Christine Lee. I hail from New York. I live an hour north of New York City. And I am a psychologist by training and by trade. And for the past decade or so, I've been online calling myself Procrastination Coach. And I've been doing that because before a decade ago, I figured out through luck and through a lot of effort how to rescue myself from the pain of chronic procrastination. So I've developed techniques and mindset strategies and funny techniques that will get you out of a pinch when you're feeling like you're in a pinch with a writing effort or a conversation that you need to get out of you, all those kinds of things. I blend the psychology with the time management and mindset work that I think we all have to handle and deal with just to have good lives. So it's been my pleasure to have this as my area of expertise and interest for the past decade. It certainly helped me to lead a much happier and smoother and easier life. And I love showing other people how to do the same.
Well, Christine, I'll tell you what, as a writer, I know that I often will sit there and just stare at a blank page on the computer. I might have some words on it, and then I just look at it and like, oh, it's just perfect the way it is, which of course I know it's not, but I get so stuck. I get stuck in my head. It's hard for me to get out of there. And you just mentioned you have some funny hacks in order to tease myself into a better mind frame. Could you just offer something right off the bat?
Sure. Just the term blank page makes me laugh because really, is there such a thing? And if there really is, and if it really does scare you, then get rid of the blank page, draw something on it, put a few words on it. It doesn't have to hold weight over you. Really, when you think about it, how can one piece of blank paper have more power than your creative genius of a self? That's the mind frame that you really want to approach your writing with, that you've got so much to share. You've got so much of that machine already practiced and ready to go with all that experience, with all that desire in you. You want to mobilize that creative energy, that motivated energy to attack the page, to make friends with the page, to say, oh, that silly page, it's only going to be blank for another 5 minutes. So whatever you can pull out of yourself to convince you that you've got the power to create and you've got the power to make something happen here is the funny trick. That's all there is, really. It's just allowing yourself to say, I'm not afraid anymore. I no longer have to terrify myself every time I have a writing assignment. It's just not a necessary habit to continue.
That is super easy. Okay. I'm like right on board with that one. I mean, I'm looking at the pair of shoes that have been sitting in the middle of the room for a while. I'm thinking,
yep.
What weight do you have over me? I can pick you up and put you where you belong. The same thing happens with my work in progress, right?
Absolutely. And I know, Alison, that you're a prolific writer too. So it's fascinating how we can be aware of our vulnerabilities and still also be really productive. So we want to really allow for all these little parts of ourselves to coexist. We don't want to be fighting with that part of ourselves. We just want to accept, okay, there's a part of me that gets anxious, that gets a little focused on my shoes on the floor when I should be focusing on the paper. Whatever it is, tolerate that part of yourself that you might have been used to being terrified of letting that part of you that's terrified run the show. get used to being the boss of the entire system, including the shoes, including the blank pieces of paper, including your creativity that's ready to burst out. Let it come out. Let it have an easy path out instead of one that's really taking up all your free time and all of your play time and all of your work time and all of your family time. We don't need to do that anymore. We're just going to say, you know what? I learned from Alison and Christine, I can focus on demand and on command, and I can actually create in these genius spurts and not have the rest of my time sucked away by this writing effort.
I'm going to go to fear. All right. I'll tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of the ask. I'm afraid of reaching out to people, asking them for help, asking them to become a sponsor for our upcoming Florida WriterCon. I'm just going to throw that out there, a little shameless plug for myself. Anyway, but that the actual ask is so hard. And someone taught me recently that if you have your own business, which writers do, each writer, we sit down, we have our own business as a writer. If your mouth is closed, your business is closed. And
Yes.
that really shifted my whole mindset of, oh my goodness, my mouth has been so closed for such a long time. No wonder I've had a hard time feeling afraid of getting out there. And so my path recently has been let's get out there and just ask. And you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, Christine, but I was so surprised at how many people just say yes. When you ask, they say yes. Yeah, it's amazing. But let's talk about that fear of overcoming that fear of, I guess it's rejection.
You've said so many different things in that past paragraph. I love it all. And I will share that Alison asked me right before we pressed record if I would consider being a sponsor to the upcoming conference. I did not know about the upcoming conference. I was happily able and very willing to consider being a sponsor. And if Alison had not opened her mouth about the opportunity, we both would have lost out because I wouldn't have known. And then she would have said, oh, I wonder if that could have been an opportunity for me. So I want everyone who's listening, including the two of us, Alison and me, what are we missing out on when we're holding ourselves back? And instead of really spending too much time wondering about that, let's push ourselves forward. Let's promote ourselves. Let's speak very easily and without fear about the opportunities that we have for our friends out there. And the people we are marketing to and the people we are collaborating with, they are our friends. We are lucky to have been introduced to each other, to be in each other's orbit. There's so many millions of people that we will never have a chance to offer our services to, or our writing to, or a sponsorship opportunity to. So let's make use of the wonderful circle that we have now. And then about the fear part, I think fear is such an individual topic because I can't make any assumptions, Alison, about what your fear of asking is, because it's so deeply rooted in your history, in your business history. And it's great that you've already made adjustments to that fear because you want your business to thrive. And it's just interesting that we all have kind of at least two sides to ourselves and our business. Part of us wants and needs it to thrive. And the other part of us is maybe acting in the total opposite direction of that wish. And we just need to uncover and unpack and be kind to ourselves and be patient with ourselves as we discover the layers of that resistance to our success. And don't be surprised if those layers include something totally insane, totally cockamamie, totally not voiceable, not speakable to anyone. It's some fear of being seen. It's some fear of being a success. It's some fear of being known. It's some fear of asking for greater income. It's some fear of improving our own lives. Who knows? In some ways, we might never really fully know what our own blocks are. But I will say it is really important to spend the time to try and investigate what are those fears rooted in? What is that one thought or those few thoughts that are keeping us behind ourselves, keeping us behind the starting line, and keeping our mouths shut? And there's so many different things, it could be cultural, religious, gender, sexuality based. It could be money based. Are the stories we were brought up with about wealth and being wealthy, or not having money, or not having enough, and all of those things. It's a huge pot that we can be drawing from. And that's why resistance can seem so difficult to handle. And that's why I think so many people feel helpless and hopeless while writing or while building a new business, because there's so many hurdles to actually get through pragmatically that really exist. So if you're doubting yourself 90% of the time, you're at some point going to be exhausted, and you're going to cave into your fearful thoughts, because they get louder and louder the bigger you become, right? The fears don't just magically vanish once you've made your first 100,000 in your business. They don't. They just kind of morph and start to get at you from some other angle. So it's no longer this. Now it's the new book and the publishing contract that you have. Then you have to deal with a whole other side of yourself that you never even knew existed. And as a psychologist, I love digging into that stuff with clients, because for me, it's just evidence of how brilliant everyone is and how creative we are at sabotaging ourselves and taking care of ourselves at the same time. My goal is just to make sure everybody feels good enough to get what they can get for themselves in their lives. And if I can, even more, to get people to really think much bigger than they've been used to, because we have the habit oftentimes of thinking much more small. English is hard today, much smaller than we need to. I think people downgrade themselves more easily than they upgrade themselves, up-level themselves in terms of their own estimation of themselves. And I would love to see that stop.
Can I ask about perfection and procrastination?
Of course.
There is a connection between perfection and procrastination. How tightly are those linked?
I think pretty tightly. In my view, perfectionism is kind of the really cruelest corner of procrastination, because it sounds great, right? Who wouldn't want to come across as perfect? Who wouldn't want to write the perfect book or essay? I would want to write that. But the effort to reach that status can be very torturous, can be very difficult, and it can be impossible too, because who's to say what is a perfect manuscript for anything? And so I see people who have a habit of being perfectionistic as being in some ways the greatest sufferers of the lot, because there's this constant need to be perfect. So not only is it good to have one effort be perfect, you have to have all the efforts afterwards be perfect as well. And so you have no room to breathe, and everything could be your next failure. And that's my take on perfectionism, that it is a particularly brutal way of keeping yourself in an inflexible position. You don't get to be creative for fun. You are always putting all of your energy towards mastering something or making it look really perfect. It's kind of like the Instagram phenomenon. Now that I'm on TikTok, I realize, oh my God, Instagram was really burdensome for me, because everybody's picture just looks so glossy, or the colors were just right, or the angles were just right, and mine never were. And then I go over TikTok and nobody cares about any of that over there. And I find that it's much more like me. It's just much more suited to my vibe and my style and my ability to take photos. So we just have to realize what is necessary for productivity. What's the minimum I need for productivity? Stick with that. If you have time and the desire to make it a notch better, go for it. No problem. But don't do it out of a pressure or a burdensome threat that you're not good enough, do it because you want to and because you love beautiful things and you have the time, and you would rather do this than anything else. You'd rather create a better Instagram picture. Go for it. That just happens not to be where I want to put my time these days. I'd much rather do 5 TikTok videos that look like a mess, but draw my favorite people, than to suffer over one Instagram post that will look and maybe not go anywhere.
I read somewhere that people often suffer in solitude when they are procrastinators. Talk about that just a little bit.
I think that's just about the worst part of procrastination, that and the fact that so many good ideas are never released into the world because of procrastination. I think that procrastination causes us to withdraw socially. And I think as a very extroverted social person, that is a terrible thing. And we do that without really noticing it, because it creeps into our lives, that need to withdraw. It's not an overnight switch kind of thing that happens, but it's kind of like, oh, let me turn down that invitation. I'm going to just decide I should work instead of doing XYZ. And then all of a sudden, you're not really talking to your friends anymore, or COVID really limited things anyway. And your work pile just got bigger because we were all stressed out during the pandemic and the isolation, but that you haven't put the effort in to restore your social life. I think many of us are trying to do that these days, because the procrastination keeps nagging at you, yelling at you, saying, well, you just haven't gotten through that pile yet. But in my belief system and the way I help people sometimes is to say, go out and have fun first, because it's that energy of joy that fuels our productivity. We can't create when we're feeling like crap. We can't create when we're feeling guilty and like everyone is after us for some assignment. We need to break that tie that procrastination has on our conscience and on our ability to socialize. We need to separate our ability to socialize from our ability to be productive. And I think that's a very healthy place to be. But sometimes it takes coaching, it takes support. It might take listening to an extra podcast to get the courage to say, you know what, they're right. I can put this aside for half an hour. It's still going to be here nagging me. I might as well go out and have coffee with a friend and talk some of this stuff through. It is okay. So I do think one of the ways to rescue yourself from chronic procrastination is to re-socialize, is to get back in the game with your friends, tell people what's going on. I also feel that people feel so guilty about their procrastination that their mouths literally start to close. They start feeling like they don't deserve help. They can't ask for help. They can't even describe the predicament that they've gotten themselves in. And I, as a recovered procrastinator, have so many stories of times when I was doing ridiculous things with my time, where I would spend hours thinking about things and not writing a single line, for sure. If you've ever had a dissertation on your to-do list, you know what I'm talking about. That whole days and weeks can go by where you are suffering and nobody knows about it or cares because it's your dissertation. Who's going to care about it except you and your advisor, maybe? And that's too few people, actually. You're too isolated. You're too stressed out. The system of doctoral training is flawed. So rescue yourself, get into therapy, get into coaching, start writing down some of your goals that are separate from your work goals so that you have a sense, oh, I actually do have a life. I don't have to suffer through the next obligation. I can mix up my obligations with parties and with reconnecting with friends post-COVID. And I get to enjoy my life every day, no matter what's going on. I don't have to live in this guilt and shame stew that I've created for myself.
Dr. Christine, do you have any suggestions for people to maybe enhance their creativity?
I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about will enhance people's creativity, socializing more, reducing the perfectionistic ideal and the stranglehold of that idea of perfectionism. I think making writing a daily practice can help. I don't consider myself a writer, but I do think touching the thing that you want to have improve every day tends to have a positive effect, because it's not the stranger anymore. You're not away from your writing for 5 days at a time, and then you have to get the energy to go back and brave it again. It just becomes the thing you do in the morning. So make it a familiar event in your daily life. Make it not such a big deal. Make it almost a boring thing that you do. Well, here I am with the journal again. Let me get the pen. Let me put the timer on for half an hour. Let me just write. All right. And I would say, because I'm talking to a whole group of writers, remember the joy that made you a writer in the first place. It wasn't self-torture that brought you into the writer space. Hopefully, it was something about the magic of writing, something about creating something that was so individually and uniquely you that you couldn't stand not being a writer. Get back to those roots, write about that stuff, act on that stuff, act from that spot instead of from the guilt, shame, and embarrassment spot. It will be much more productive, I promise.
What wonderful suggestions. Dr. Christine, how can people get in touch with you?
I am all over the internet, including on TikTok as Procrastination Coach. So I invite your listeners to follow me, look me up. I do a lot of teaching on social media, particularly on Instagram and TikTok. And it just is these topics are what I'm obsessed about. So I might as well be sharing these thoughts across the day. And I do that on these social media websites. I do have a main website, which is also Procrastination Coach. And I have a podcast that I love. And Alison has been on the podcast too. It is called the Make Time for Success podcast. And Alison and her lovely sister were on, and we had a blast on the show talking about women in business and how much we need to support each other, and how important that is, that we can elevate each other's missions and voices and make the business easier when we're together. And I firmly believe that. I thank you, Alison, for inviting me on the show and helping me to get my message out. I appreciate your helping me throughout, and it's been a pleasure knowing you.
Do you have an offer for anybody?
I do too. I have a free resource library, and it's simply 12 downloadable PDF type documents, each with a different spin. So you're going to find a planner, you're going to find a motivational piece in there, you're going to find a jumpstart questionnaire. If you fill out the questionnaire, you're going to feel like you want to get back into your productivity again. And I have that for you at procrastinationcoach.com/library. Again, it's procrastinationcoach.com/library. It's free for you. Dig into those resources and enjoy them.
All right, Dr. Christine Lee, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
I always get nervous with these, but yes, I am. Go for it.
What is one thing that made you smile today?
I think this conversation has made me really smile a lot. People are not seeing us on video, but I just love talking about this, and you're such a delight to be with, Alison. So thank you. Thank you. So I would say I've been smiling a lot here. And what else did I do today? Nothing particular stands out about today, but I am a smiler, I will say. So you'll see me smiling all across social media, hamming it up on TikTok. Follow me there.
Do you have nicknames for your children? You don't have to share them. You can just say yes or no.
I would say yes. And the reason why I hesitated is because they rotate. And I don't think I ever call them by their proper names. I actually refer to them by different nicknames, which really aren't rooted in any particular meaning either. It's just affection, rooted in affection purely. So silly nicknames. Yes. But yes, the answer is yes.
All right. Final question. Mountains or beach?
Oh, wow. I, in some way, would say neither. I think I can only take a beach for like a day, and I'm not much of a walker. And so that means I'm not much of a climber. So I am actually more a city person. And I like exploring cityscapes, different cities, new towns, kind of a thing. And people. I'm more of a people person than I think a sights person, if that makes any sense at all.
It does. I understand. All right, Dr. Christine Lee, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I had a great time talking out my thoughts, sharing them with you all. Thank you so much, Alison. And hope everyone who's listening gets to restore their sense of wholeness about their creativity because of our conversation today. If that happens, that will make me so happy.
Well, I'm going to start naming my blank piece of paper and taking away its power.
Yes, absolutely.
It's now a pauper. It's no longer the king.
Indeed.
All right. Well, you have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Woo. We're all done.
Thank you so much. I really was smiling a lot during our conversation because I love talking about this stuff. Yeah.
Dr. Christine Lee is a clinical psychologist with more than 20 years experience. Currently in private practice in New York City and Scarsdale, New York. Her main objective is to enable those to feel their best and achieve their goals. For more information about Dr. Christine Lee, visit her website at procrastinationcoach.com or find her on social at Procrastination Coach. Join us for a weekend jam-packed with networking opportunities, workshops, awards ceremonies, book signings, and a youth summit Friday, October 28th through October 30th. Florida Writer Youth Summit Saturday, October 29th. For more information, visit floridawriters.org. Until next time.